Hello, I'm going to be tuning a Zimmermann grand piano. It's a fairly new instrument, a couple of years old, and it was tuned about 6 months ago, but due to environment it needs doing again. I use, instead of a tuning fork at the moment, as I'm often losing them, I use an app on my phone called Pianometer, and that tells you the pitch of the note, so I gauge the average amount that it is flat. So it's holding its pitch quite well, it's just the unisons need attention. So it's on average about a cent or so flat. A cent, if you're not familiar with that, is 1/100th of a semitone. So we're going to start with the temperament scale, as I did when I tuned the upright piano. So we're going to get it to pitch, get it to 0 on the app. I don't rely 100% on the app, I tune mostly by ear, but this acts as a third ear, just so I can, for speed really. You could hear a little clicking sound, that's the pin moving in the hole, because you don't want it just to twist.
It's fascinating how it changes on your little app, the note.
Yeah, the needle, can you see that?
Yes, yes, yes. That's quite interesting.
So that's on, it fluctuates with the harmonic, so it's on 0. So we'll close that, and then we're going to do it, tune the temperament scale with the app, just to make sure it's accurate. But I will check it orally as well. Thing is to get the unisons nice and crisp first time. So I set the pin, because it's so tight in the hole, it can easily just twist and then go out of tune again. So I feel it give, slightly sharp, and then ease it back into position. The 2 strings are completely beatless. And then we do the 3rd string. Again, you can hear a slight creaking sound as the pin turns. And then we do the same for all the other notes in the temperament scale. We go C, F, as before in the other video. So I'll do this fairly quickly, and I won't explain, because I've already said how we do it all, so you'll pick up how I put in the unisons. I put in the unisons for each note as I go. Other tuners have different ways of doing this, as long as it's stable and sounds good. It doesn't matter how we do it. And especially in America, they tend to use a strip of felt and list off the outer 2 strings in the group of 3, the trichord, and just tune the centre strings to the temperament. Then they put in the unisons afterwards. As long as it works and is stable, there's nothing wrong with doing it that way, but I prefer to put the unisons in as I go along. So I'll carry on with the temperament scale, and let's see what it sounds like. It should sound pretty good. Listening to the upper harmonics, the 5th should be slightly narrow. Aiming for about 2 high beats a second up here. I've achieved that. So again, I'm going to put the unisons in. So I've just done the A below middle C in the temperament scale. This is time to start checking that everything is accurate. When you do a 4th, you want to make sure it's got about 1 beat a second on the fundamentals. There's wow, wow.
What's that for? Why is that?
That's because it's very slightly wide.
Okay.
Because of the temperament. So to get it all to fit, you then check your other intervals like thirds and sixths. So we're going to check F to A, and it should be about 7 beats a second wide, which is about right. Because if you tune the intervals in the temperament perfectly pure, you'd come to like keys like F sharp, and they'd sound dreadful. That's Pythagorean's comma. That's where the harmonics don't fit in with the actual keys on the piano. You get a gap, so you have to allow for that by tuning the intervals, the fourths and fifths, slightly out, so that it's all equally distributed amongst all the keys of the piano. Again, with the put the unisons in. I'm actually hitting the note quite firmly so as to increase the stability of the tuning, because if you tune it too gently, somebody will play loud and knock the note out of tune, so that allows the...
So it sets?
Yeah, so it sets, yeah. Beating in the sixths are slightly faster than the thirds. Again, I think they're wide.
When you say six, does that mean like the note in that particular octave?
It's the interval, yeah, in the octave between the G and these a sixth.
For? Can you just explain?
The wedge is so you only hear one string or two strings at a time. It mutes off the strings you don't want to hear. It's just a piece of felt tapered at the end. You've got the various widths. You've got a smaller one, which is useful in the treble, and I've got somewhere a rubber one, but I'm using these two for the moment. I'll put it in position on the B, which is the note I'm tuning that's ready. Listening to all the harmonics up this end at the top, the high harmonics, because I could just hear a bit of activity in the high harmonics going, so we don't want that if we can help it. Trying to get it completely beatless. That's better. Onto the B. Still a little bit of movement in that. The thing with tuning is keep checking as you're going along, because sometimes unisons can drift. It's easy, even if you've been tuning for 30 years, not to set a pin properly. So you keep checking it and correcting your mistakes as you go along. Again, 1 beat a second or thereabout between the B and the E. Then we check with the G. And it should be about 8 beats a second compared to 7 beats a second with the F to A. And as you go up the temperament scale, we haven't done those yet, the beat rates for the thirds should get gradually faster as you go up the piano. Checking the thirds again. They seem to be pretty consistent, and I'll check the third G to B with the F to D sixth. It should be the same sort of beat rate. Yeah, 8 beats a second. Sixth should be the same beat rate as the third. Like that. And I haven't done those yet, but it'll be the same up the scale. Coming up to the end of the temperament scale, tuning the A sharp. We might think, no, that's a B flat, but in the piano trade, all the black notes are sharps.
Okay.
Just makes things a lot easier.
But that's like piano music because
Yeah.
sometimes that's the same. They use
keys.
sharps instead of flats.
Yeah. That all fits. The F to A sharp sounds good. The thirds. As you can hear, the beating gets gradually faster as you go up the scale, and it's all consistent, it's all even, there's no nasty gaps. You haven't got one third which is a lot faster than the other and in the wrong order. So the triads sound, they always sound a bit off if you're a violinist and you're used to pure intervals, so it will sound a bit off because of the temperament, but that's the thing with a piano tuning. You have to tune all the intervals that's very slightly out of tune, so they're all equally out of tune, so it all fits, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, yes.
So I'm going to turn that, because I don't need that now. Put that away. And so we're going to go up the piano to the top, octaves and unisons, and we check. When you check your octaves, you always check your fourths and your fifths. Well, that hasn't been tuned yet, so that sounds pretty dreadful, so I'm going to put that in. Again, going slightly above to set the pin. Get it beatless, and then check your fourths, your fifths. If the fourths and fifths are out, when you've checked your octaves, that means you haven't done your octave properly. And I'll be talking more about checking as I go further up the piano, because then you get different intervals to check when you've got more notes that have been tuned. Checking the fifths and the fourths. That's pretty good. I'll show you how we check octaves as well. Is we play the third below the bottom note of the octave, so we've got D to D is an octave, so I can play A sharp to D. And you can hear the beating, about 9 beats a second. And then do the 10th. And the beat rate should be the same if the octave is in tune. If the 10th beats slower than the 3rd, the octave is narrow. The top note will be flat. If it is faster, then the octave will be wide. As I'm working up the treble, there are enough notes tuned so I can check double octaves. This is because of the nature of the piano and the strings. The harmonics aren't necessarily where they should be in the harmonic series. The smaller the piano, the greater this inharmonicity. So you might have to accommodate this by stretching the octaves, make them very slightly wide so it all fits. Because on a smaller piano, you'd notice that if you tuned the octave beatless, pure, it would sound out. You need to do a double octave.
So I'm assuming that if you're going to pick out a new piano for yourself, you're better with like a tall upright or a grand piano rather than a baby grand, or a smaller, like a console or a studio or something of that nature.
Yeah, very small baby grands from the 1930s, the one that are like wider than they are long. And spinets, which are the vertical pianos which only come up to here, really don't have a satisfactory tone quality because of their especially in the bass, because they're very short, fat strings and a very small soundboard. So the fundamental sounds aren't very good in the bass. You get this inharmonicity, and some of them, especially the older ones, are so inharmonic it doesn't make any difference whether they're tuned or not. Now we come into the uppermost section of the piano. We come to a bit of a problem where the crank doesn't fit properly in the space, so to get a good turning. So my favourite way of doing this is to come round the end and tune this way.
What happens if there's a wall though and you can't do that? What would you do?
Is to tune left-handed. Get used to it after a while. Everything is back to front if you're right-handed. Because it's often the case if you're doing concert tuning and you've got like other instruments and things all set up, you can't get round. You don't have to move everything because they'll have to put it all back again, which isn't fair on them. So if there's no room around the side, do it left-handed, and if you're not used to it, it just takes a little bit more time. But that's fair. That's fine. One thing I'd like to explain at this point in the tuning is about falseness. Falseness is an occurrence where one string of the trichord, that's the 3 strings in unison, sounds out of tune like 2 strings beating at once. You play the note with the 1 string sounding. It doesn't happen in this case, but you'd hear it going wah, 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 like it was 2 strings out of tune. This could be caused by a small spot of rust on the string, a defect in the bridge, or general age of the piano. You don't get it so much in modern pianos. Pianos of this quality, it's very rare to find falseness. You might get it in cheaper modern pianos, but you certainly find it in old pianos where the strings are old. You just have to adapt to it, compensate. Sometimes you can tune the adjacent string slightly out of tune, so it beats the same rate as the false beating. It sometimes works. It's a bit hit and miss, but you just have to live with falseness. Have to hit the notes quite fast in succession because there's a very short decay on the treble notes. It's a bit iffy. It's a very small amount of falseness in that note, so we can't get it perfectly crisp. Improve that C sharp. I've done all the way up to the treble, so we're now working our way down the bass, which is the last section of the piano to tune. The bass is a lot easier to tune than the treble because they've got longer delays. You've got more control over the crank and less chance of falseness and less strings to tune. that's all tuned. Just a case of testing it now. For any unisons that might have drifted, or octaves that might be off, this does happen sometimes. A little bit of movement in that one. Drifted unison. Testing always ensures that the tuning pins are set properly, so it stays where you put it. This top G was a bit false. Let me try and get it a little bit better. And there we have it. Nice crisp tuned piano.